What's going on, everybody? Let's talk about some of the dangers of keeping different and multiple strategies aligned with one another when it comes to fixing your personal credit. Why you should never mix and match different strategies when it comes to fixing your personal credit. One of the biggest things that I've seen, which is quite common now, and I don't know why people do this, is that they jump from one credit repair company to another, or try to jump from a credit repair company and then they try to do it themselves. And then they actually get themselves in a lot of trouble. The reason for me sharing this with you guys is because when you do that, when you're mixing and matching multiple different strategies, you're actually hurting your ability to get any type of favorable outcomes long term. The biggest thing you need to be careful with when it comes to actually mixing and matching strategies is the conflict of interest between strategies, right? So a lot of people will deploy specific types of strategies to get their credit resolved. And what happens is some of the strategies that they deploy is actually counterproductive and counteracting whatever existing strategies that they've already had done in the past. Now, a lot of times these strategies are rotated because a client, or let's say yourself, you're becoming impatient with outcomes, right? One of the biggest things I want to tell you when it comes to fixing your credit is, yes, you need multiple strategies to make it work. But if you start to become impatient with the strategies that you already deployed, you're not going to get the outcomes that you're looking for. In fact, it's going to hurt you more than it's going to do you good. So for that specific reason, you need to bring together strategies that you can concentrate and hone in on, and have to give it the respectable timeline that it needs in order to make it work. You have to give it a respectable timeline to make yourself see the results and outcomes based on that strategy executed. A good time frame, a rule of thumb is a good time frame is usually between 60 to 90 days to see some sort of changes. When you're jumping into personal credit, when you're jumping into fixing the negative credit that's already there, you cannot rush the process. You cannot go ahead and force the credit reporting agencies into a solution where you're going to get it overnight. So there's a lot of people who will claim this, and for sure you can perhaps see results within 30 to 60 days, but how long will those results last is the real question. To have consistent results, to have gone through a specific type of battle in this whole war, requires for you to execute strategies and be patient with the timelines respective of that strategy. If you don't do that, what's going to happen is you're going to mess up the process and you're going to actually hurt yourself more than do yourself any good. So for that reason, it's very important that you follow strategies that makes perfect sense. That you follow strategies that you have given enough timeline for it to work. So I'm going to give you guys a small roadmap that you can follow that will help you determine when is it the right time to switch up strategies. So the first thing you need to know about that is, number one, how far back have you deployed the strategy? And if your strategy has been deployed for over 45 days, calendar days that is, and you're not seeing any type of results or outcomes, then at that moment, that's when I would start worrying. At that moment, that's when I would say, okay, now we got to revamp the strategy. Something's wrong. It's not working. And we got to hit the bank with that, right? So if you see that within 45 days, there's no results or outcomes and no sort of correspondence or responses from the bureaus, then at that point, I would definitely start to question the process and strategy. That's the time that I would actually take it in my own hands and try to get the communications from the credit reporting agencies to see what's going on. Now, let's say past the 45 days, you don't see anything or correspondence. That's the time that you can start switching up strategy. Because now if you do switch up the strategy, you've canceled out that initial 30 to 45 day timeline for them to call it a frivolous dispute, right? Another thing you have to understand is when the credit reporting agencies consider your stuff to be frivolous, they have to demonstrate proof that prior disputes were handled properly or were investigated in accordance to the FCRA's reasonable investigation rule. Calling an item or a dispute frivolous or a challenge frivolous needs to have grounds for complaining in that nature, needs to have grounds for the reason as to why they would consider it frivolous in the first place. In most instances, the credit reporting agencies don't necessarily have evidence of them actually doing the reasonable work required to look into some of the negative challenges or disputes that were happening with the client. A good example of this, and we talked about in one of my videos recently, is that they actually don't even send the ACDV form to the creditor that you're challenging. They actually do it based on a generic system. IOSCA basically kicks back generic templates, and that's their process of considering a reasonable investigation. So for an item to be considered frivolous, let's say if you're challenging it after the 45-day timeline, because you respect that, you saw that I'm not going to wait any longer because probably something's never going to come after that. At that point, you switch up strategies. And then if they say with your new strategy that it's considered frivolous, then that means that they would have previous disputes that were filed, and they have to show you evidence that you actually did submit disputes in the past. And for them to pull up a record that, yeah, we did, here it is, then what you can do at that point is say, well, why have I never gotten documentation from you as required by law when an update or change is being made to my credit reports? So at that point, basically, they themselves are trapping their process. So to go away from that, after the 45-day timeline, just to go back to the strategy, you start a new strategy. And let's just say that's just, don't call it frivolous, but they start looking into it. One of the biggest things for you to make sure that your strategy is being deployed properly is to ensure maximum level of communications. That's another critical component that a lot of people miss out on. Communication is ever so important. And the maximum level of communication requires for you to reach out to the credit bureaus and you actually start making some phone conversations with them to ask them the 3 important questions that we always talk about. The first question, how many pieces of documentation and or items have you received from me? And have you received it all? That's the first. Second thing, right? The second thing is very important. What is the reasonable time frame for me to expect for you to get me the communication necessary to get this resolved, right? What's the timeline for you to investigate this? And the third and final question you want to ask them is, will you be reaching out to the creditors that are listed in that specific set of questions and or challenges? Or should I be doing that? And the reason for that question, as I explained prior, is because that series of questioning and the level of questioning forces them to submit an ACDV form that traps them into doing what they're supposed to do in the first place to make sure that there is a reasonable investigation being concluded from their side. So once you pass through that questioning, you're ensuring maximum efficiency for the strategy that you're employing. Now, I don't know which strategy you'll be using, but whatever you'd use, and hopefully it's ethical and it's not something tactically illegal, you should be able to get some sort of reasonable outcomes, given the fact that you're maximizing the level of communication, which is another big part of getting the job done efficiently, right? You have to maximize communication. The minute you do that, the better you're going to get, especially with the terms of outcomes and response times and communication from the bureaus to give you the information that you're looking for. So deploy those strategies efficiently. And then let's say you get a response back. You should start seeing some angle of changes. You should start seeing some modifications. Sometimes it's also common that the credit reporting agency sends you a piece of mail that says, hey, investigation is in progress. Expect a reasonable response by a certain specified timeline. And that's usually what people can go based on. So whatever you do, just make sure that those rules are followed, because that's the only time that I would recommend that you start switching up strategies so that, one or more strategies don't start to intersect or conflict with one another. And the fact here is, if you are basically doing these type of rules and following the protocols I've shared with you, chances are you're going to get amazing outcomes, but also you're going to have less likelihood of the credit bureaus calling it a frivolous dispute. And the reason I say that is because when you're doing one strategy and you're seeing it's not working, and then you do another one and you do another one, what happens is you're challenging it for the same reason. And if the credit bureaus have already verified the item belongs to you and they've validated the information, to continuously try to attack it basically can't be considered frivolous because they've already deemed their investigation complete. And that can hurt your ability regardless how many times you change it up. So to prevent that catastrophic, situation and the time being lost in trying to resolve this, always make sure you give it the reasonable timeline required, which is then, like I said, the 30 to 45 days. Always make sure that you're communicating with them via phone conversation and asking the 3 important questions that I just laid out for you. And always give it enough room with the patience that's required to get your credit to where it needs to be. And use ethical, clean, and strategies that are both tactical and strategic long-term to get you the best outcomes and results to increase your FICO score, depending on whatever you need it for. So with that said, I hope that you guys understood the importance of using strategy one at a time and what is the timelines that you need to follow when it comes to credit repair strategies to get the best results. If you enjoyed the video, I'm going to encourage you guys to share it. Don't forget to destroy and smash that thumbs up. Every time you do it, YouTube will push out my content. Also, subscribe, turn the notifications on to all, so every time there's videos like these, you guys will be the first to know. With that said, I'm going to turn it over to you guys. What are some of the most important things that you would consider when it comes to fixing your personal credit in reference to both timelines and strategy? What do you think about what I shared with you guys today? Do you agree or disagree? And if so, let me know by writing below the video, by leaving a comment. And with that said, this is definitely your guide and mentor, Early to Rafter. Catch you guys on the next one. Bye for now.